Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, depending on where you're calling in from, and welcome to today's session, Blue Economy and Ocean Conservation, Island-Led Climate Solutions, as part of our Island Voices at COP30 series. My name is Ariana Abdul-Noor, the Sustainable Development Manager here at Island Innovation, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. You will have seen a poll pop up on the chat, and this helps us get to know you a little bit better. So please fill it out and we can share the results a little bit later. As oceans change and climate impact intensifies, island communities are at the forefront, pioneering strategies to protect coastal populations, sustain marine ecosystems, and advance national adaptation plans. In today's session, we're going to explore how island-led innovation, impact investing, and nature-based solutions are really helping shape a more resilient and sustainable blue economy, one that really centers local voices and priorities. So before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. This session is being hosted on Zoom and live streamed across our social media platforms. All attendees are muted with cameras off. Please do use the Q&A function to share your questions, including your name, your country, and if possible, the speaker that you would like to address. I will do my best to weave your questions into the conversation later this session. Now, I'm honored to introduce our distinguished speakers joining us today. We have Paulo Veiga, President of the Carlos Albertino Veiga Foundation and former Minister of the Sea. Wilbur Dubin, apologies if I've got that incorrect, co-founder and CEO of Belize Blue Nutrients. We have Simon Dent, co-founder and managing director at Outrigger Impact. Ariane Steinmeier, Global Outreach and Engagement Director at the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. And Karuna Rana, Founding Director of Big Ocean States Initiative. Lastly, we have Louise Heaps, Lead for Sustainable Blue Economy at WWF. Thank you all for joining today. It's a privilege to have such a diverse panel of experts bringing government, private sector, NGO, and community perspectives together. Before we jump into today's discussion, I would like to share a quick preview of a major event happening next year that continues the conversation that we're starting here. In April 2026, Island Innovation will host the Global Sustainable Islands Summit in Gran Canaria, Spain, in collaboration with the Cabildo de Gran Canaria. GSIS 26 will bring together island leaders, innovators, investors, policymakers for an in-person summit that is focused on real-world solutions in climate resilience, in energy, in sustainable development, right in one of Europe's leading island hubs. To give you a taste of what to expect, here's a short teaser video. Building on the themes that we cover in our Global Sustainable Island Summit, today's session brings those ideas to life through the voices of island leaders, innovators, and experts who are really driving those practical solutions in the blue economy. From policy and governance to community-led initiatives and impact investing, our distinguished panel will share insights, experiences, and strategies that really demonstrate how island-led action is shaping a sustainable and a resilient ocean future. With that, I am honored to introduce our first speaker, Paulo Veiga. Before I do, we have the results of the poll. So great to see a lot of Europe and Caribbean as expected, given the time zones. Not so much from the Pacific, understandably. I'm sure they're all sleeping right now. We have a lot of private sector, some government, some NGOs, some academia. And understandably, industry-wise, we have a lot of environmental services and/or ocean conservation, as well as waste, circular economy, tourism, and politics. So great to see so many of you here, and we're really, really excited to reintroduce, as as I nearly just brought him to the stage but interrupted him, Paulo Veiga.
Thank
Hi,
you very much. Hello.
Hi. So, Paulo, as former Minister of the Sea and now President of the Carlos Albertino Vega Foundation, you really have a unique vantage point on the policy and capacity needs of island nations. Could you share with us some of the key challenges that islands face and whether in capacity building, finance, or regional coordination as they try to scale sustainable ocean management? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, distinguished delegates and colleagues. It's an honor to be here to bring the voice of Cabo Verde to COP30 and thank Island Innovation for this opportunity. So we are an archipelago where sea is our horizon, is our school and our destiny. Small islands are not the margins of the world. We are its most sensitive heart. We are where humanity first feels the tides of climate change. In Cabo Verde, we live every day what the world is only beginning to sense: water scarcity, coastal erosion, and economic vulnerability aggravated by the climate crisis. But on our islands also lives something the world seems to have forgotten: the capacity to resist. Our community knows how to start anew after droughts or rebuild after the rain. The island the islands are living laboratories of climate adaptation, and what we do on a small scale can inspire solution on a global scale. Cape Verde is small on land, but immense at sea. 99.3% of our territory is ocean. And that blue space is where the future of our country, and I personally believe the future of humanity, resides. We are asserting ourselves as a great ocean state, prioritizing maritime sustainability, clean energy, and scientific knowledge. Our Clean Sea Cabo Verde program, recognized under the UN Decade of Ocean Science, is an example of this vision. It is a unified mission bringing together scientists, community, and public policy. Our community environmental guards, fishermen transformed into defenders of the sea, represent the best of us: courage to change in order to protect what we love. As president of the foundation, I know that this fight begins in the classroom, in our communities. We believe the best way to face vulnerability is to create opportunity, investing in people, education, and skills for the new blue economy. But this vision runs into a structural wall faced by all seats: the financial trap. We need investments, but we are often locked out of concessional climate finance by obsolete GNI per capita metrics. This metrics ignores our extreme ocean vulnerability, our reliance on fragile marine ecosystem that are rapidly degrading. My first policy appeal to the COP is a call for reform. We need a global recognized ocean vulnerability index. Our resilience, our reliance on the ocean must be the defining metric for climate finance eligibility, not income. We need to normalize debt for nature swaps and mechanisms that directly support our fiscal space to invest in resilience. We are ready to issue new sustainable instruments, but we need partners to share the risk. Finally, no island can face the ocean alone. Better said, no country can face the ocean alone. The sea that separates us must become the bridge that unites us. My second policy appeal is the call for alliance. We need a new diplomacy of the islands, a global alliance between small island developing state and subnational island jurisdiction, a network that shares knowledge, technology, and finance. We must pool our scientific data and technical capacity to counter transboundary threats like the EU fishing and pollution. Our solutions in renewable energy and ocean management are seeds of the future for all. The world must look at islands not as victims, but as partners, as beacon that point the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the islands are the mirror where humanity sees its future, beautiful and fragile, yet full of possibilities. In Cabo Verde, we say, the sea that separates us is the same that unites us. I leave the plea today from the Amazon. Let the ocean be what unites us in science, in solidarity, and in hope. Let us invest in the hands of the island people, for in their resilience may lie the very future of our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paolo, for those beautiful words and valuable insights on strengthening institutional partnerships and capacity. And most importantly, of course, this regional collaboration and alliances, truly vital for this long-term resilience. And I love this idea as islands as mirrors. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Wilbur, turning to you. So your work in Belize Blue Nutrient shows really how the blue economy can provide ecological and economic benefits. Could you please tell us a little bit more about how seaweed farming supports community livelihoods and climate adaptation in Belize, and perhaps what lessons you might think that are relevant to other island contexts?
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you to Island Innovation for the invitation to share our story. So typically when you think about adapting to climate change and you search Belize, a lot of it is not related to mariculture or small scale, farming in the sea. But I've always been one of the ones who share that, look, we can't, when we think about conservation, when we think about adaptation, it can't just be that we're conserving things, but not conserving people's livelihood, right? That's a very critical part of the success of any intervention. Now, seaweed farming in Belize is not new. It's not new globally, but it's also not new in Belize. We've been doing it for about 25 years thereabout, but there have been many, many, many challenges along the way. I won't deny that, from losing all the crop due to storms or just not having the right knowledge on how to properly do it, But one thing we've always maintained here in Belize that we cannot damage the environment while we're trying to benefit from it, right? Now, how exactly this is benefiting the people in Belize, it is, I would say, at its nascent stage. We're only now getting more people involved into seaweed farming. It's something that it's not customary for us to do here in Belize. If you look at climate smart farming, most of what you'll find for Belize is agriculture, right? So while we have the support of the fisheries department and we have the support of fantastic NGOs like the Ternate Sustainability Association, TASA, there's a lot of work to do, but we are doing it. And as a company, Blue Nutrients, how we came about, look, we have some fantastic people working in seaweed farming in Belize, and there are, international buyers out there who are looking for sustainably produced products, but there was no connection between these producers and these buyers. So how do we expand an industry? How do we grow an industry if no one knows that we have some of the best products in the world, right? So when we think about how Blue Nutrients came about, we came about to bridge the gap between the producers and the international buyers. Now, there are many, many, many ways that seaweed farming benefits the environment, right? For one, there's carbon sequestration. And while it can be quantified to some degree, we can't yet, tap into the carbon markets. But there's also things like habitat creation for juvenile marine species. And here in Belize, lobster is a very big thing, right? So juvenile lobsters, they're recruited in the seaweed, so it serves as a habitat for them. for fish, both commercially and ecologically important. And they're all ecologically important, right? But ultimately, this seaweed farming, and it's one of these activities that keep the fishers or marine folks in the water, as opposed to interventions that take them out of the water and, let's say, on land. Like in Belize, there's a lot of intervention that get them into tourism, but not everyone wants to get out of the water, right? So seaweed farming is a way to keep them where their heart lies, and that's in the water. But it also, like I said, there's tremendous benefits to the environment. But even more so, seaweed has long been a source of nutrition for people across the globe, not just in the Caribbean. We customarily use it in the Caribbean, but it has been a fantastic source of nutrition. But along the way, again, we've noticed that there are certain things missing. And as a company, we're not all about the profit. We want to be a B Corp. Ultimately, we want to ensure that we benefit society, benefit the environment, and also benefit people's health. So fortunately, we applied for a grant from the Belize Fund for a Sustainable Future to do some fantastic work. And we'll share a video in a second about the work that we're doing. But this is just the start of it for us. We want to do it bigger. We want to do it better. We want to get more people involved. So we're looking for the right partners to join us and really expand this so that we can make it even bigger and better. So, if you will, I'd love to share the video right now.
The goal of the project is to create a self-financing, sustainable, and mature seaweed industry for Belize. So the 5 objectives of this project are to develop the comprehensive quality control training program, to train and certify 22 individuals using that program, to develop and market 2 new seaweed value-added products to help diversify income and contribute to the new seaweed industry fund. And of course, we're going to create the blueprint of the seaweed industry fund to allow for future capitalization. And finally, we're going to promote collaboration and garner support from the Ministry of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries. By doing so, we're going to be contributing to the development of the mariculture sector, which has been identified as a priority for development under numerous plans and strategies for Belize. We're going to be tackling the issue of low seaweed quality and also a lack of sustainable financing for small-scale farmers. This project aligns very well with Belize Fund thematic area number 4. We're going to be teaching farmers how to maintain quality once they've harvested the seaweed, and that includes how they deal with the transport vessel, how they deal with the harvest equipment, how they deal with the drying, and making sure it's not under-dried, over-dried, or not subjected to bacterial or chemical contamination, all of the things that would otherwise negatively impact the quality of the seaweed. In addition to the training in quality control, we're also going to be creating a new and sustainable source of financing, and we're coining it as a Seaweed Industry Fund. That fund will provide grants to farmers to start up farms, to rehabilitate farms, and it will also provide strategic grants to support organizations. Where this project is going to be focused or based is primarily in Independence. However, there will be several site visits to Turnef in Saddle Key or Channel Key area and Lark Key. So we're often asked about sustainability and replication of these types of projects. The innovative collaborative process that we're going to implement will see revenues from the sale of the newly created value-added products continually feed into the Seaweed Industry Fund, right? And we have the ability to add new products that feed even more into the fund. Now, in terms of the training, the program will have been embedded within the structure of Blue Nutrients as a company, so we will continue to offer that under our extension services, and of course we can expand the program as new technologies and stuff come to the forefront.
Thank you. And like it shows, there are fantastic people we work with. And ultimately, We want this to be bigger than just Belize. We want this to be, to be something that can be replicated in the region. And ultimately, too, while the speaker before me said it, while we are separated by seas and by geographic boundaries, it doesn't mean that we have to be separated. We can collaborate to make these interventions very, very successful. So we are certainly happy to extend an invitation to organizations that want to collaborate. We're happy to share the knowledge we have, and obviously, we're not as big in production as some of the Asian countries, but there are great achievements that we've had, and great things that we're doing, and we'd love to just share that. So I'm happy to attend and share our story. So thank you to everyone who has supported us thus far, and yeah.
Inspiring, Wilbur. Thank you. Such a strong example of how innovation and local knowledge can work hand in hand to strengthen that resilience and local incomes too. And thank you as well for capturing the work so beautifully in the video you shared. These are really the kind of projects that excite us here at Island Innovation, and I can't imagine it would take much convincing for your invite to be taken up by many people in the conversation as well. So thank you so much for the work you do, and hopefully this partnership will continue long in the future.
Thank you.
Ariane, over to you. So the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance has been leading the force in bringing together governments, insurers, communities. Question. So could you illustrate the power of cross-sector coalitions in advancing ocean resilience, and perhaps share one or two examples of what's working well through your initiatives?
Yeah, thank you so much for having Aura at the panel as well. And it was really good to see all the amazing locally led innovations already. I think, as one of the previous speakers said, islands are the mirror. I also wanted to obviously underline that they're also, a place for innovation. And so innovation always needs partnerships. And Aura was founded about 5 years ago, actually at a conference around risk in one of the Caribbean islands, where actually some insurance companies, together with some banks, NGOs, and others, came together to really tackle the notion of increasing risk coming with climate change. And what one was founding was that it's often really hard to foster multi-sectoral collaboration when you don't speak the same language, when you don't have the same understanding about risk and innovations. And so that's where the idea of the Ocean Risk Resilience Action Alliance was born, and out of that spirit, sort of Aura was built. 5 years later, we have 130 members across sort of the finance and insurance sector, and the NGOs, the science, but also really most importantly, bringing the governments to the table. And that is really important when we think about the mission of Aura, which is really try to innovate and pilot new financial innovations in this space, and especially bringing in the private sector. So one of the examples I want to start with is really collaboration across the private sector to help them to shift their investment more towards a sustainable and regenerative or nature positive blue economy. And so what we have done over the last 2 years is bringing partners from the banking and insurance sector. Deutsche Bank is the lead banking sector, and AXA, our lead insurance partner, on the table, and see how they would be able to shift towards a more regenerative blue economy through their investment portfolio, and how they can commit to a robust net zero commitment, nature positive financial system, as well as really also looking at their portfolio in a holistic way, and not just looking at the ocean particularly, but really how they can mainstream that across their portfolio. And at the UN Ocean Conference earlier this year in June, we were fortunate enough to have sort of that alliance even grow, and that we have now 3.5 trillion US dollars under sort of that new sort of shift towards a regenerative blue economy under their assets. So Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, WTW, Palladium are all some of the new sort of signatories of that commitment. And I think the reason why this is an important first step is also because it shows that it signals the demand and alignment, which is also important for if we think about scaling and how we enable sort of solutions led also by islands to scale. It also helps to shape standards and metrics, which is also important when we think about what does it actually mean to invest into sustainable and regenerative blue economy projects or different sectors within it. But it also connects these partnership and coalitions we are building to a financial architecture. And ultimately, what we are trying to do is also building a capital market for the ocean. So bringing that in a structured way and really build, therefore, an architecture and for new innovative, both locally led innovation, as well as sort of some of the more larger top-down financial innovations to come to life. Another example, and I'm glad to see also my colleague Simon Dent on the panel, is the Sea Change Impact Financing Facility with the Ocean Risk Resilience Action Alliance has built with its partners, which is basically an overarching framework where we wanted to innovate and incubate new financial vehicles, and the Outrigger Impact Fund is one of them. And we will hear more about it from Simon, but it also really helps to understand what is it needed to scale some of these solutions. You know, you have impact investing, but you also need guarantees to really help to then ensure and encourage new investors to invest into the blue economy. Often also it's the national banks, and I wanted to highlight that here as well, that the Nautilus Blue Guarantee Company, which we have been building with partners, is really also focusing on how do you encourage, therefore, pension funds, national banks to invest into the blue economy in specific countries, and how sort of a guarantee can help to de-risk some of that investment. And the de-risking could be around sort of policy risk, but it's obviously climate change risk and other risks, which often, especially in the island contexts, are important to build into the investment portfolio. Last but not least, and I can share a little bit later also other examples, Aura, together with some of our members, have been investing into 50 projects around 30 countries to also then scale and innovate new financial solutions from the local level. So which was mainly around sort of parametric insurance and other financial vehicles, which are really locally led and which also help to build new partnerships across the different sectors. So one of the examples is, for example, the parametric insurance schemes, which we have been scaling both in Indonesia, the Philippines, but also now the MAR Fund, where NGOs and the private sector came together to test and pilot them. And now we are able to scale it through some of our partners. And that really is to showcase that it's now we have an investable pipeline and we have proven solutions. And I think COP30 now is sort of the call for the decade for implementation, really needs that push and that voice around the table that there are locally led solutions as well as innovative financial vehicles to be able to help to scale.
Thank you, Ariane. And I really didn't realize how young Aura was. You'd really never be able to tell with the impact that you've made so far, including a fantastic $3.5 trillion commitment, if I understood that correctly, as well as these local-led parametric insurance programs. So it's really, really encouraging to see how this coalition building is able to drive that tangible change and risk reduction on the ground. So thanks so much for your contributions, and I look forward to hearing more about it when we bring you all back to the stage. So I would like now to invite Louise Heaps as lead for Sustainable Blue Economy at WWF. Louise, hi. So you've
Hi.
seen firsthand how nature-based solutions can actually balance conservation and economic growth. Could you please emphasize the role of the marine ecosystem protection and nature-based approaches in ensuring that the blue economy growth really supports both people and planet?
Yes, sure, I'll try. It's quite a big topic. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. But I don't think it's going to come as a great surprise that the ocean's natural assets have enormous social and economic value. And WWF actually estimated the value to be $24 trillion, releasing benefits of up to $2.5 trillion per annum. We estimated that back in 2015. I think it still stands now. And this natural capital is providing a myriad of ecosystem goods and services that underpin local, national, and global economies, with island nations and in particular SIDS having a high dependency on the ocean for their well-being and prosperity. And not least, the ocean provides critical food and livelihoods to millions of people. So fisheries alone provides 50% of the protein for SIDS, and it's been estimated also that coral reefs provide up to 36 billion in terms of tourism revenues every year. And in addition, coastal ecosystems also provide significant protection against climate-related weather events, which we well know. So again, it's been estimated that mangrove restoration could save around $65 billion per year in terms of storm and flood damage. But if lost or destroyed, 15 million more people will actually be flooded annually. And the demands on this natural capital resource base is, however, doubling during this decade, and that's being fired by trillions of dollars of mainstream finance. And in fact, at the global level, so not at the SIDS level, WWF have estimated that around $1.45 trillion of private sector credit finance is being targeted at the top seafood, shipping, and renewable energy companies. And significant amounts of this capital, largely from the global north, is going to developing countries in the global south, including island nations and SIDS. And as such, in fact, SIDS do contribute significantly to global supplies of fish, for example. But we know that the unsustainable business as usual economy is essentially leading us to a climate and biodiversity crisis in our ocean. And of course, the most immediate concerns are the impacts on the most vulnerable citizens in coastal communities. And put simply, there's just too much finance being targeted at unsustainable, destructive development pathways, and insufficient has been targeted at safe and just sustainable blue economy pathways. And the impacts associated with this are creating significant risk, which Ariane mentioned earlier, not only to society, but also to business. And not least, it's affecting our ability to adapt and build resilience in this rapidly changing climate of ours, and is creating disproportionately high costs to SIDS, for example, which face annual climate adaptation costs of between $22 and $26 billion per annum. So to deliver an equitable and sustainable blue economy, we must manage our ocean's natural assets in a way that keeps us safe, in a safe and just space, entirely within ecosystem limits, producing benefits that meet the needs of all humans, both now and in the future. And if properly resourced and managed sustainably, and as long as certain tipping points are not breached, the ocean does have enormous capacity to regenerate and provide substantial gains to society. But there is this enormous finance gap for delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals, around 3.9 trillion, and current investments into nature-based solutions is estimated to be around 200 billion, and only a tiny fraction of that is targeted at the oceans, which in the last decade were estimated to be around 13 billion in terms of ODA and philanthropy going into the ocean SDG, so the SDG 14. So given the status and continuing pressure as well of philanthropic grant and ODA sources of finance, we're really looking now more and more to the private sector finance as the only real opportunity to strengthen the natural resource base and to support social and economic prosperity in the long term. And so essentially, there's a real need now to move from sort of funding to financing. But the trends in private investment in terms of ocean health and sustainable blue economy still remain quite low. And again, you know, Ariane talked about Aura's kind of desire to really change the game on this and is looking at some of the mechanisms that need to be delivered at a global level to really enhance this. But while financiers can take actions themselves to redirect finance away from harmful practices, redirecting private sector finance towards the sustainable blue economy is going to require several critical enabling conditions to be addressed, because the ocean is actually considered to be quite a high risk environment, not least because of regulatory gaps and inconsistencies, data gaps, capacity challenges, complex tenure arrangements, lack of transparency, the list goes on. And these are all big issues for any private sector finance body. And these challenges are only further compounded in island developing nations and SIDS, which also face these sort of high debt levels, low credit ratings, low economic diversity and taxation base, high transaction costs, etc. It goes on and on. So essentially, attracting private sector finance must be supported by strong government policy, regulation and actions that serve to de-risk the enabling environment. And some of these actions that I'm about to just mention might seem unrelated in a way to delivering a vibrant and resilient sustainable blue economy, but they are absolutely fundamental. So most importantly, it's critical that governments recognise the value of ocean ecosystems in terms of building a resilient national economy. Capacity and resources must be targeted at the restoration, protection and the sustainable management of natural resources, which should be thought of as the bedrock of a sustainable blue economy. I mean, let's face it, not many financiers would be prepared to finance something where the assets are poorly managed and they're yielding uncertain revenues. So investing in tools like marine protected areas and ecosystem-based marine spatial planning all build the resilience and the integrity of the ocean. And so they shouldn't be considered to be a nice to have, but as tools that secure national economies and attract finance. And in fact, most notably, greater levels of fish biomass have been recorded around marine protected areas. And WWF, in fact, found that protecting around 10 to 20% of our ocean could, in fact, deliver benefits of up to 920 billion. And that was over a 35-year timeframe. And I suspect it's quite a conservative estimate. The other thing that's really key is to have a sustainable ocean plan. Having a commonly agreed integrated ecosystem based vision and this plan is absolutely critical. And it's really important to place ocean health as a primary objective within that plan. It must also come hand in hand with integrated governance across the public sector to manage that plan, and strong integrated multi-stakeholder governance to deliver that plan. So, for example, a decision to protect a particular coral reef by one ministry could be superseded by decisions to build a port by another ministry. This is not an uncommon situation. And again, this creates risk to the private sector who might be considering investing in or establishing a tourism company that relies on that coral reef for income. There's also a need for strong regulation, including positive incentives and disincentives. It's really to create a sort of level playing field that actors wanting to move towards a sustainable blue economy are not disadvantaged. And in addition, sort of national policies that secure tenure and establish robust enforcement mechanisms all contribute to building confidence and strengthening private sector finance interests. It's also important to think about data, and it's critical. Obviously, data is critical to guide strong and adaptive management of the ocean's natural capital and these nature-based solutions. But the finance sector also relies on good data, information and evidence. So national budgets should incorporate targeted research, data frameworks, and of course the infrastructure that would then support these sort of good financial decisions. And in terms of capacity building, it's also crucial that the transition to a sustainable blue economy is delivered at all levels, not least because of the significant contribution of coastal communities to local economies and their substantive and largely unpaid role as coastal ecosystem stewards. So significant capacity challenges must be addressed to empower and enable coastal communities to develop in ways that are not going to degrade the natural resource base on which they depend, and that enable them to actually manage these natural resources effectively and these nature-based solutions. So by placing a really strong focus on the enabling environment, countries will essentially be sending out very strong signals to the finance sector that the assets are well governed and that there are systems in place to manage, monitor, and report on large-scale financing. And for example, in the case of the Seychelles, high-level national commitments and a strong blue economy roadmap were considered to be critical to the adoption of the blue bond and the debt for nature swap. And so I just finally wanted to finish by highlighting the newly launched high-level panel Sustainable Ocean Handbook, to which I also contributed. And I think that really provides a clear suite of recommended steps for governments on best practice for delivery and for financing of a sustainable ocean plan. And I would definitely recommend it as a useful guide to refer to, and it literally came out a couple of weeks ago, so is available on LinkedIn and online. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. Yeah, a great reminder that protecting ecosystems is not just an environmental goal, but of course an economic necessity. And managing our oceans national assets to meet the needs of all human requires really moving towards funding to finance for nature-based solutions. And recognizing the value of ecosystems and of course sustainably managing these ecosystems as an essential component for flourishing economies. So perhaps also if you could share the link to the handbook in the chat, I know a lot of our audience would benefit from that. Thank you for your contributions and looking forward to discussing later in this session. So for now, I would like to invite Simon Dent to the screen. Simon, I'm not sure if you're here.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Simon. So, Simon, from your perspective at Outrigger Impact, the private sector plays a huge role in financing ocean solutions. Could you please explain how impact investing and blended finance can really help scale sustainable blue economy projects, particularly, of course, in small island developing states where access to finance remains limited? Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. I'm sorry, I'm stuck between travels. But Outrigger Impact is a blended finance fund that is focused specifically on small island developing states. And we are looking to find blue economy investments in these countries. And we leverage off what's been type of told by the previous speakers, but the fact that the ocean is our largest natural asset and acts as our largest carbon sink and basically provides food and substance to 3 billion people, that creates big markets. So really we consider small island developing states to really be big ocean states. They're stewarding 30% of the ocean. They're looking after 20% of the world's biodiversity, 40% of the world's coral reefs, and they're generating more than 30% of their GDP from the ocean. Kiribati controls an EEZ that's the size of India, Seychelles, an EEZ that's 2.5 times France, and Jamaica's EEZ is essentially the same as the UK. So this provides significant opportunity. Not only that, these islands are positioned along key maritime routes, they're near or on major fisheries, and they're significant tourist centers. This means that these islands need to leverage their social, economic, and environmental potential. So the Outrigger is essentially structured as a blended finance fund. We have a debt tranche, an equity tranche, and a junior tranche that de-risks our investments and attracts private capital into our structure. We look at this as a way to apply finance to the unique situations around islands and the ability to essentially think about scaling and innovating in these nations. We also put this together with a grant facility or an investment readiness facility that allows us to build early stage projects, look at nature-based solutions, biodiversity, and think about capacity building where it's needed. Outrigger focuses essentially really on 20 of the largest SIDS, and we split them up regionally. So essentially we're looking at the Caribbean, we look at the Indian Ocean, Atlantic and Indian Ocean, and the Pacific. Broadly, we will deploy roughly 50% of the fund in the Caribbean, and then 25% in the Indian Ocean and 25% in the Pacific. And we're doing this through really four ways. We're making direct investments into really SMEs, already the M and SMEs, and we're trying to encourage local entrepreneurs and local business people to develop projects in the blue economy and to think about how they can scale that up, bringing type of both economic resilience and environmental resilience to countries. We're also thinking about how we can bring and accelerate business models from outside of the islands, potentially through like blue technology solutions that are proven, so that we can invest in these technologies and bring them to the islands quicker than they may be through a normal course of practice. And therefore we can deliver blue technology, potentially electric transportation, thinking about data and digital solutions around monitoring, for instance, MPAs, and invest into that type of change and transition. We are also looking specifically at infrastructure and circular economy solutions. So where we're talking about pollution, recycling, thinking about plastics, thinking about waste, and wherever there's type of direct or indirect leakage or pollution into the ocean, this is a key area for areas that we can invest and protect our ocean assets. And then finally, we are very focused on thinking how we can help the ecology, the ecosystems, and the nature on island and in the EEZ. And so we're making investments into conservation solutions, large-scale marine protected area projects, thinking about mangrove restoration on an island-wide scale, trying to deliver island-wide solutions in nature. So what does this really mean in terms of projects, and what are we looking at? And then I think we can go back to sectors that's been mentioned already, but fisheries, clearly significant sector for islands. If we take the value of tuna caught by SIDS, it's in the region of $5 to $7 billion annually, but much of it is taken by foreign fleets. Essentially, the value captured locally is often 15 to 20% of that number. And so what we're trying to do is think about how islands can essentially be a bigger part of that value chain, and how they can produce value-added solutions, process and cannery on island, and significantly monetize the value chain through fisheries, for instance. And you can see it if you look at something like Kiribati again. I mean, the end value of their tuna is essentially something like $1.5 to $2 billion, but they're really only taking fishing licenses and fishing fees in the range of $200 million. So there's a value gap there that can be used. Clean energy is clearly another very significant area. SIDS need to make this transition to clean energy, move away from this type of dependence on fuel oil and diesel, which is some 80% of their energy needs today, and move through to a renewable energy investment scenario. That's an investment gap that is in the region of $1.5 to $3 billion. Very significant. Clearly, we already have ecotourism. This is a significant opportunity. Tourism can make up to 30 to 80% of GDP in islands. Tourist receipts across the island chain that we're looking at is something like $50 billion a year. And trying to make that more sustainable, move it towards a more type of ecotourism approach, bring tourism to add value to the islands, protect the ecosystems, really be involved in the nature process and in thinking about oceans and their link to the islands and to the community, is a key direction in developing sustainable tourism. And we're looking at those things through ecotourism sites, thinking about marine protected areas, managing the ocean assets, thinking about erosion, thinking about planning, and how new investments should be deployed. circular economy we've touched on, but thinking about water security, thinking about how you manage pollution, how do we manage grey-green infrastructure, artificial reefs, resilient systems, resilient housing. All of this is a key element for the fund. This gap is something like $5 billion a year for the islands. There's significant investment dollars that are needed in individual projects, but on an island-wide basis, you have hundreds of millions of dollars is being allocated to this area. So that's another area that we're looking at. We, of course, the target size of our fund is $100 million. We are deploying a range of investment ticket sizes. So with our grant facility, we can do repayable grants in the region of $250,000, where we see real interest around investments from an investment readiness situation. So for early stage projects that can make their way to the fund, we use the grant mechanism. In the fund or the investment dollar window, we are looking at ticket size between $2 and $10 million in projects. But generally, what we're trying to do is work with aligned investors and local stakeholders. And so with our dollars, we're looking to get a level of other commitments and co-investment. And so those project sizes can be 2 to 5 times bigger than our ticket size. But by having a flexible funding vehicle for the islands, we are encouraging and leveraging these types of solutions. And then essentially what we're working with our partners to deliver on this type of program. And so we work with co-investors like the European Investment Bank, with UK government through UK International Development, who are donors to the Technical Assistance Facility, working with Aura that was mentioned by Ariana. And we have MOUs with various other stakeholders, including the Commonwealth, Conservation International, and ICVA. So we have a partnership model. We strongly believe when we come to finance that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so essentially, it's not just about Outrigger, and Outrigger can't solve the problem itself. So we're working with partners, projects, and co-investors to deliver a sustainable investment program for islands. So thank you.
Fantastic insight, Simon. Thank you. It's really clear through your work at Outrigger Impact that mobilizing private capital alongside public finance really seems to be a key enabler for actually innovating islands. Your focus on highlighting external business models like the blue technology solutions you referenced is really a big part of our ethos here at Island Innovation in bridging resources and circular economy models. So it's fantastic to hear the island-wide solution case studies that you've already delivered so far, as well as what's on the horizon for you, namely these sustainable ecotourism models that catalyze local indigenous ownership as part of these nature-based solutions. So thank you for your fantastic work. Your contributions on Big Ocean States leads very nicely into our next speaker, who is Karuna Rana. Karuna, as the founding director of the Big Ocean States Initiative, you've really been instrumental in reframing how island nations assert leadership in global ocean governance. Island nations are increasingly driving the agenda on equitable and sustainable ocean management. Could you please share a little bit about how the Big Ocean States Initiative is really helping strengthen collaboration and collective influence among island nations, and what this really means for you in shaping resilience and just blue economy pathways? Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Sorry for the bad lighting. I am currently in between a work dinner, so I'm literally taking this from my car, but it's really great to be here. It's such a good panel, so thank you so much for putting this together, Island Innovation. Now, the Big Ocean States Initiative, BOSSI, is a pan-island community-led organization focused on catalyzing ocean innovation, impact, and leadership for islands by islands. And the Big Ocean States name is very intentional. I've worked in this space for almost 15 years of my life now. And often I've heard, the term small island developing states, and I've often asked myself, small compared to what? And I think this has been beautifully explained before by the previous speakers. But one thing we decided to do around 2 years ago is to really change the narrative from small to big and from victims to ocean powerhouses, because islands are the tropical majority of the world. So I'm glad to see a lot more people use the term Big Ocean States, and it's very intentional because Big Ocean States abbreviates to BOSS compared to Large Ocean States, which is LOSS. So that's a bit of the context. Now, at the Big Ocean States Initiative, as I mentioned, BOSSI is very much focused on community, and by community, it's also focused on ocean equity. Now, as ocean powerhouses, there is a lot at stake for islands, but given that there is a lot at stake for islands, there is also a lot of the solutions and innovation that could come from islands and are coming from islands, but often don't get the funding, the visibility that they need. So that's the first thing that we have seen a lot in our work. The second thing is we focus a lot on ocean equity. So whenever we talk about ocean innovation globally, or blue finance and the millions and trillions of dollars that are going everywhere, our job is to ask who is directly benefiting from the ocean, who is indirectly benefiting from it. There's a direct and indirect benefits. And secondly, who are the decision makers? It is a no-brainer that as islanders and as Big Ocean States, we should be at the forefront of it, but very often that's not the case, and especially when it comes to funding. And so there is a lot that we have to unpack here. I know with Outrigger working on the fund, it's such a great initiative, and I'm very excited about that. But we did a paper and we interviewed a few local innovators in the Indian Ocean region, and one of the things that came out over and over again is a lot of times innovations don't get far because they're stuck at the ideation stage. They're stuck at the prototype stage. So it goes beyond the first grant, or the first 250,000 grant, or something smaller or bigger than that. Very often it's really a question of, okay, you're just starting out and you can't access funding because you need to be around for 2 years, or you need to have an access to a lab. We've had a project that was a women-led project a few years ago. And the project was really amazing in tackling plastic pollution, but it really didn't get far because they didn't have access to a lab, things like that. And it's you can't ask someone to have 2 years of existence when they're just starting out for them to get their first grant. So these are some of the small issues that we've noticed, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of the national ecosystems not being ready or not conducive for innovations to happen locally. Because lived experiences are powerful, local innovations are powerful, but they won't get the funding that they deserve and they need if they're not supported at the very outset. And a lot of it also has to do with the fact that a lot of these innovations that happen don't get funded because they are not visible. So in addition to a finance gap, there is also a visibility and access gap for island-based innovators that we have seen. So at BOSSI, what are we doing as a Pan-Island organization is two things. One, we are connecting islands and empowering them to work with each other and learn from each other. And we are doing that through a mapping exercise, a Blue Innovators platform that we are currently working on. And we're piloting that in 7 islands. And these islands, there are 2 in each region, and 2 in the Africa region, 2 in Caribbean, 2 in Pacific. It includes Cabo Verde as well. The previous speaker would love to hear that. I would love to work with you on that, but it includes Cabo Verde, it includes Mauritius for our region, Marshall Islands, Fiji, Antigua, and Barbuda, and Barbados, and Maldives. So these are our 7 pilot islands, and we're working with the University of West Indies as well. to really set up this Blue Innovators platform in a very intentional way, because it would mean doing a mapping exercise within the community to really understand what are the innovations that are happening and what kind of support is needed. Innovations are not just the tech innovations. They're also social innovations. They could also be traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge that are not seen as innovations, but are innovations that happen on the ground and need to be mapped. So through this platform, we want to connect these solutions to each other so that there can be a South-South cooperation and knowledge exchange, but so that we can also connect these solutions to the world, to the investment community, to philanthropic community, and to also the global north for solutions that could, go from global south to global north. So that's one of the things we're working on. And the second thing we're working on, which is aligned to that, is we hear a lot about investment readiness. Now, what exactly is that? So we're working on a Blue Investment Readiness Index because a lot of time the funding, especially the very early stage funding, has to do with how investment ready are you. And a lot of the investment readiness has to come from, as I mentioned, the local and the national R&D ecosystem. So we have devised a few indices to measure for each of the island how investment ready they are, especially when it comes to attracting investments for early stage and local innovations. So that's something that we're also piloting in these islands. And the goal with all of this is very simple. It's to show the world that innovations already exist and can become big and can come from islands to the world, but only if they get the support that they need from the very early stage. So a lot of our work is not just on this, it's also building, leadership capacity for young people, for local communities. It's also organizing ocean immersion days and dialogues, democratizing access to the ocean. So a lot of the work, as I mentioned, has to do with equity, and it very much focused on innovation and closing the finance gap, but focusing also on leadership and advocacy, because they go hand in hand. Unfortunately, because I'm tied up with this commitment, I won't be able to stay too long, but in case I drop out before the Q&A, I'd love to stay connected. And again, thank you for putting this together, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Karuna. A really powerful reflection on the importance of language and how island leadership can really redefine global ocean governance to ensure equity really remains at the heart of the blue economy transition. So thank you for joining in your busy schedule. And if you're able to, please put your email or LinkedIn in the chat so that people can connect with you further after. Thank you to all the panelists so far for the rich and varied perspectives. We'll now move into a more interactive discussion and take some questions from our audience. So to our attendees, please continue sharing your questions in the Q&A box, including your name, your country, and if a specific panelist, then who your question is directed to. I'd like to invite all the panelists back and extend this question to all of you. So I hope I have Louise back on the screen. I have Wilbur. Hopefully Ariane and Simon and Karuna, if she's able to, will join shortly. So we often speak about this idea of the triple or the quadruple helix, which explores the dynamic interaction between different institutional spheres, including academia, industry, government, and civil society. But what does an ideal partnership look between these sectors in advancing island-led blue economy in action? Open to the stage for whoever would like to take that one.
Sure. Well, I'll take a stab at it here. Now, in Belize here, it is, at least from what I've seen, right? It's not very common that we have a very synergistic flow between or among all of these, key players. But the ideal situation here in Belize, as it relates to mariculture, aquaculture, is the government playing its role first and foremost, developing the enabling environment for us to do what we need to do, right? It's not the government's role to give us grants or hold our hands. That's not what it's about. Academia, for us, we've recently engaged with the University of Belize, the national university, to do some of the research that we need done. And that's not only on, the ensuring that we're not damaging the ecosystem, but looking at things like labeling, nutritional, all of these things that are very important on the international market, but also helping to model what a sustainable mariculture industry is actually about. But as the private sector now, we are boots on the ground. We're the ones in the water trying to make it happen, trying to juggle all of the, not damaging the environment, making sure that we're still following whatever guidelines the government has. But we also play the role of feeding information to them, because it can't be just a top-down approach from the government. They develop policies and say, okay, well, you have to follow it. Well, what about our input, right? And here in Belize, they're still in the development stage of the mariculture regulations, for instance. So we're operating, but there are no regulations. So how do we work hand in hand to ensure that what they develop isn't going to stifle us? As small countries, small producers, the circumstances, the external factors impacting our success is going to be different than, for instance, a multi-billion-dollar corporation coming into the country and setting up, a billion-dollar farm. It's different. These are all, grassroots individuals who don't have a lot of funding, who don't have a lot of resources to do what they do, but they have the drive to get it done. But this is also where, the financing comes into play, because at the end of the day, whether it's a grant or it's impact investment or it's blended financing, it's needed, right? And I shared this recently, that the approach here in Belize over the past 20 years has been that there are different interventions in seaweed farming, and there have been a scattered funding, as what I call it. And I look at it this way, right? Different groups have gotten different amount of funds to do different things related to seaweed farming and related to climate adaptation through that. But I compare it to having, for instance, a love for antique cars or classic cars. We have a budget, let's say $100,000, but we have 5 cars that we want to fix. Well, you know what? You can't fix all 5 cars with $100,000, right? But it has been in such a way that the funding has been spread so thin that we don't have any cars fully functional, right? They're beautiful and they have potential, but it's not fully functional, right? So the ideal situation is where we come together as a group and agree, look, this is the vessel that we want to fully invest in. This is the vessel that's going to take us from point A to point B. And when we get there, that can then help to generate the funds that we all, get to benefit from. And that's why us as a company, we're small, but we're ambitious. This is why, as a private company, we're working to develop what we've coined as a seaweed industry fund to exactly do what I've said, bridge the gap. Because a lot of times the funds, whether donation, grants, or investment, they're not designed for the micro entities, right? The one individual who is just ambitious and wants to do it. There's always a need to be a part of a big formal group. So what we're trying to do is, break it down to develop a vessel that we can actually reach these individuals, because they don't want to. Not all of them want to be a part of a big group, right? It relates to similar to a fish market, where if you get everyone in a fish market, it just gets very loud. Right. But if you meet the fishers one-on-one, it's a very different conversation. So really, that's how we see the ideal situation is. And government can leverage funding, they can leverage partnerships to get our name out there, get our brand out there, because it all trickles down. Ultimately, it all trickles back down to the individuals who are in the water making a difference. And when we do it in a sustainable way, the ecosystem then benefits. But we always say, look, it's not that. And I think here in Belize, we take it for granted. We're big in conservation, right? So you don't have to tell us that, oh well, you shouldn't damage your environment. No, that's what we grew up with. So that's not a secondary thought. That's ingrained in everything we do. So that's how I see it being. The ideal situation here in Belize. And it's not there as yet, but I think we're slowly inching our way, in that direction.
Fantastic, Wilbur. Thank you. And some very helpful analogies there. I'm going to go over to Louise now, and then Paolo, and then Ariane.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think there are many examples to draw from, to be honest, as this sort of mix of stakeholders is absolutely critical to delivering effective island-led conservation and sustainable development action. And each of these stakeholders do provide a very distinct role. So certainly, as I and Wilbur have mentioned, governments need to ensure the appropriate natural resource management and governance is in place to deliver sort of priority global commitments to climate change and biodiversity, and to ensure that the social and economic needs of their nationals are met both now and into the future. So by doing so, they will also de-risk these assets and are more likely to attract this sustainable finance to support the key outcomes. Private sector need to drive sustainable development and conservation actions forward through financing, but also through aligning their own activities with sustainable blue economy and nature positive guidance, which Wilbur's sort of alluding to, I think. And NGOs, as always, have a very diverse range of roles. So we are conveners, convening range of stakeholders, making sure that effective stakeholder engagement is in place and the voices of communities are heard. We also serve to undertake applied science and build capacity to empower those communities to undertake the sort of conservation action, and also for them to advocate for strong action from both government and private sector. And I just wanted to give one example. So I'm actually working on an Asian Development Bank TA project at the moment, which is focusing on coral reef parametric insurance in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Fiji, and recognizing the sort of significant social and economic value of coral reefs to developing island nation communities. This is essentially looking at using parametric insurance for restoration of coral reefs following a severe climate event. So it's based on a specific trigger rather than the sort of common or garden indemnity insurance. And it's become very clear that a combination of actors is absolutely critical to the design and implementation of this insurance to ensure that the right legislation, governance, mandate, capacity and resourcing is all in place, that all of those things are needed to make this work, and to ensure that the reef is already sort of reasonably well managed to make the insurance worthwhile, to ensure there's a willing premium payer, right policy holder, to ensure that finance can flow quickly to where it's needed most, and to ensure that there's well-trained and resourced teams on the ground willing and able to implement restoration actions. So, of course, the government's role is to ensure the reef is well managed, but they also need to set the legislative environment to support coral reef insurance. So I think in Indonesia, the coral reefs actually have to be registered as an asset, for example, in order for the insurance to go forward. So that's another area that we're also looking at. Whilst governments might be able to become policyholders, we're also looking at private sector to become policyholders and to pay the premiums. So, for example, tourism associations or individual hotel groups, which is actually happening in Fiji now. And then, of course, NGOs have been important conveners of the various stakeholders in this design process, and have also kind of been involved in engaging the community groups to sort of outline what the benefits are, but also to do some training because it's the communities that will be the first responders to any weather event like that and to do the restoration work. So that's just by way of example of the three groups. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Louise. And for those of you that aren't familiar with sort of parametric insurance, I encourage you to look up the work that WWF are doing, because it's really fantastic and real kind of prime innovation that we're working with in our community. So thank you so much, Louise, for that. Paolo?
So I had the honor and pleasure to be on both sides. I was the Minister of Sea of Cabo Verde, and we actually developed, with the support of FIO, the Blue Economy Charter, and also the framework. So we actually have in our stock exchange blue bonds, green bonds, and everything. So we are probably the first country that has done a swap for climate with the debt that we have with Portugal. So we have 100 million debt with them, and we are gonna, as long as we use this money to build on resilience, on climate change, or in blue economy, they consider it as paid to them. So this is a great example, I think, that could be used all over. But we are also, when we built the framework and the blue economy, we spent 3 years listening to the fisherman community, the coastal community, all the NGOs. So it was built bottom up and not government down. So it took a long time. And we actually had the first result of this on the 8th of August. We had a storm hit one of our islands, the island of Saint Vicente. And it actually, unfortunately, we had 9 fatality, and the island was practically destroyed. And 2 months later, the island is totally clean. All the NGOs and the diaspora, they actually did more than the government. The government did more the work of coordinating and received the aids, the international aids, but who actually went to the people and helped things work was this framework that we built, and that it proved to work. So I think we should expand this through all the islands and have a network where we all learn and share experience of, because I'm sure our difficulties are no different from any other island, or little differences, but it can be used as an example. And I think, for example, when we were doing the framework for the blue economy, I traveled twice to Seychelles, which at the time was the top. And what I've noticed, it was the big problem about implementing blue economy is how do you finance it? Because they started it the other way around. So we started by looking how to finance it, how to have climate bond and exchange with our biggest bilateral player, which is Portugal. And now we are expanding it to the European Union and even to the United States. So it's a great way of looking things the other way around. So I think we have here a lot that we can share with each other and learn. And I leave the challenge for us to actually make a network where we talk a lot about scientifically about open data. So regarding the ocean and the blue economy and the climate change, none of us individually can make a difference. And for us to be, as humanity, to be resilient to this and to adapt to this, we need to share experience. Thank you.
Thank you for your fantastic contributions, especially insightful as you've been on both sides of the coin. So you really know how it works behind the scenes.
It was
Ariane?
Yeah, thank you for all the great examples. And as I mentioned before already, Aura's goal is really to bring and be this convener, to bring the multi-stakeholders around the table. We often do this around what we call solution labs, where they are quite small and targeted, because I think what we haven't talked about is that you not only have to speak the same language, but you have to also trust each other. So I think building that trust and working together is a key focus of ours as well. And also to bring the different expertise. And the parametric insurance was already mentioned. And one example is where you can see the role of the different stakeholders were really around the first parametric insurance of small-scale fishers, or for small-scale fishers in the Philippines, with WTW and RARE working with partners to figure out how this could work, how it also can really be bottom-up led in terms of bringing the small-scale fishers around the table. How do you use existing governance structures on the local level? Let it be the saving clubs or also local government structures in place around, for example, small-scale fisheries registration and so forth, so on and so forth, and really therefore build that bottom-up. Together also with the local governments, and embedding that into the necessary policies. So at the moment, there are nearly 15,000 small-scale fishers who are benefiting from parametric insurance, which really enables them also to really fish safely. They need to register, they need to fish sustainable in order to be part of that scheme. But if the weather's conditions are severe and they can't sort of go out fishing, they have a rapid payout. And the reason why parametric insurance, I think, is a great example here for locally led innovations with the support of some of the private sector members is because it's, it speeds up the payouts, but also provides that predictability of these payouts for insurance. It lowers the transaction cost as well. And obviously, these payouts are linked to pre-agreed resilience actions. And so another example is also in the Mesoamerican Reef with the MAR Fund. It's the MAR insurance program, where now across 11 sites, they are parametric insurance, really providing rapid funding for reef restoration after hurricanes. And that has been really a great way of also bringing the different partners around the table around the Mesoamerican Reef, and now have that scaled across the Caribbean.
Yeah, ultimately the quadruple helix doesn't work unless there is trust. So it's been really great to hear your reflections of specific case studies where there has been that trust built and the impact that's been able to be created. Simon will take your answer, and then we'll go over to the Q&A box as it's been popping off throughout the session. So I'd love to get some of the questions answered. I think you're muted.
Thank you. So yes, I think it's, for me, I think it's also important to think about scale. I think we need to engage in programs that can deliver type of scale at an island-wide level or at a regional level. And I think that's how we look at the investment dollars. And so really what we're trying to do there is engage with the stakeholders, but I think importantly, some of that now has to be driven by governments. And I think governments have to engage in a blue economy strategy in a meaningful way. And I think the team here has been very has contributed a lot to the thinking and to the macro views of how we approach that, from an impact point of view, governance point of view. And I think now we have to look a little bit more at what we can practically do on the ground. And I think Sargassum is a really interesting example, and it combines technology and it combines essentially organizational efficiency. And so this is obviously a significant issue for the majority of Caribbean islands. It's done very ad hoc at the minute. It's costing governments quite a lot of money. There are a number of very interesting technology solutions that are being developed to address sargassum, and there's more than one way that you can do it, but it's a fragmented approach that's being left to essentially a range of startup companies. And I think we need to and use this as an example, because clearly it's a priority for Caribbean islands, but use it as a priority to really think about a joined up approach, thinking about how you can look at the whole supply chain around sargassum and read into that around the particular value chain and blue economy, and then invest into the infrastructure and the development of that with the right safeguards, but really to try and deploy and make a difference. And I think that driven by aligned private sector parties and aligned good government policy and action. And I think that's very important. And that also touches on thinking about how you bring technology more broadly to the island, creating type of sandboxes for energy, which, for instance, Bermuda has a very good example of that, thinking about sandboxes for digital technology for monitoring and surveillance and MPAs, thinking about how you can deploy quicker, grey-green infrastructure, mangrove restoration as a tool Louise talked about, and some protecting and creating resilience. And I think these cases have been proven, but we need to think larger and deliver against that type of ambition. So that's what I would say there.
Fantastic, thank you. And this question of how to scale is obviously at the forefront of all of these projects, because it's great if they're locally led and impacting the local community, but how do we really make that impact cross-regional? So thank you so much for your contributions there. I'm worried that we only have about 5 minutes left, and I have a lot of questions. So I do welcome everyone who has attended this session to reach out where they can to the panelists. But I'd like to turn to the audience now and bring up one of the very important questions that has been floated by a few people, which is this idea of metrics and how you actually quantify or qualify the work that's being done. So this question is from Iona, specifically to Louise, but we welcome any of the other speakers to jump in as well. Iona asks, how would you define a vibrant, resilient, and sustainable blue economy in measurable terms? Which indicators help track ocean health and economic resilience?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Thank you so much for posing that to me at 4:30 in the afternoon. But it's a great question. Thank you. So there are a number of sort of indicator frameworks that are out there globally already. So obviously the Sustainable Development Goal for Oceans has a set of indicators that are entirely relevant to this conservation. There's also things like the Ocean Health Index, which also sets quite a very solid set of indicators that might also be worth looking at as well. And there are a number of frameworks that are emerging that I would definitely keep your eye on. So that are more sort of focused on the private sector and trying to sort of identify targets and potential indicators for them. So there's the Science-Based Targets Network developing quite a few targets which include oceans now. So there's already a fisheries set of targets out there already. So that's great. And in fact, WWF, and in fact, there is another sort of initiative are looking at nature positive frameworks now, and we have a number of criteria which align with, I think there's about 6 maritime sectors that we've developed criteria for, which are specifically, I guess, trying to support businesses to go towards a nature positive pathway. And again, this is all about, so WWF US actually were the ones that developed that, although it's a global product. And I would definitely have a look at that. I think it's not very easy to develop indicators for vibrant or for some of the social and economic priorities that we want, but certainly there are many attempts to do so. Many individual organisations have them already, but I think it's a great question. I think we probably do need one set of sustainable blue economy indicators at some point. But at the moment, I think I'm a very much do now, make do person. And I think there is plenty of frameworks out there to build on and to work from. So hopefully that's a good enough answer. This is not, indicators is not really my wheelhouse, to be honest. So there may be others on the panel that can provide a more scientific, technical input than me. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. We do have time for one last intervention from someone else in the panel if they would like to contribute.
Maybe
Yeah.
just say that the IUCN also published at the World Conservation Congress a motion around sort of what a sustainable and regenerative blue economy looks like. I can also put that in the chat, but I think that is also the political will, in addition to the metrics and the techniques of it and the details, it's also how do you create the political will, how do you build sort of therefore also the demand, and then sort of having others pick it up. So I think these kind of interventions are always important, as well as obviously building then the metrics and the framework around it.
Absolutely. If we had another half hour, I'm sure Paolo could tell us all about political will and how to act on it, but that will have to be another session. I think that's all we have time for today. So I'd like to say a huge thank you for your fantastic contributions. They really beautifully capture the urgency and optimism that really define ocean leadership today. As we wrap up, a few key reflections stand out from today's discussion. The blue economy is not just about growth, but about resilience and equity. Partnerships across governments, investors, NGOs, and communities are really vital to scaling that impact, as Simon emphasized. And most importantly, island leadership really continues to set the pace for global ocean action. So a huge thank you to all of our panelists today, Paolo, Wilbur, Simon, Ariane, Karuna, and Louise, and also to everyone who joined us online today from all different time zones. The conversation really doesn't end here. You can stay connected through Island Innovation's platforms, continue engaging with our community on LinkedIn, Facebook, and beyond. And I really hope that the panelists as well will engage with you further and contribute their expertise, because I know it is invaluable. So thank you again for your time and your insights, and let's continue to champion island-led solutions for a sustainable blue future. Have a wonderful day or evening wherever you're joining